In this video, I'm going to show you a couple tricks on adding light to a scene. So, first trick I'm going to show you is a very simple one of using the paint bucket tool to use the gradients to create a radial gradient around a light. So, what you want to do is you want to isolate where your light is. Make sure that you create a level just above where those are. You can see that all my lights are on this level, so I'm going to create a glow just above it. Then I'm going to change over to my paint bucket tool, and I'm going to change that to the gradient tool. You can see currently my gradient is changing from dark into nothingness, which is good. So I'm going to check it off. If it's not that, then you might want to change what kind of style it works from. Next, I need to make sure that I have the color that I want. So I'm going to eyedrop from the brightest section, or the roughly brightest section, from these lights. Then, using my gradient tool, I'm going to click and drag using the radiance. You can see I'm layering it up, but if you look at the top bar, you can see that I have it set to the radiant gradient, and I have an opacity of 31%. And you can see that it's starting to make a glow around there, and that can be very helpful. Choosing an even brighter color for the center and layering that up can make that glow feel even more dramatic. And if it ever gets too high, you might want to lower the opacity or play with the blending layer. You can see that the different kind of blending layers will blend the top layer down with the bottom layers. And depending on which kind of an effect you're trying to get, it might be very helpful. Though, if you're very canny with just using opacities, then you don't have to try very hard. The next method is using a soft-edged brush. And you can see I have this down pretty low. I'm going to pick from a relatively bright color, use the brush, and just kind of draw it in. So that works out pretty well. And same thing, I might just lower the opacity, or I might get a smudge brush, smudge that around a little bit, or even get an eraser with a low opacity and erase the edges just a bit, just so I could reduce the strength of it all so that it feels subtle. When you're creating lights, something that you want to pay attention to is where else in the scene and what else is going to be hit by that light. From the gradient, it's going to come out and kind of strike areas, but if you want to make it look really nice, you'll want to get a paintbrush tool, sample from one of the lighter areas, and you'll kind of look around your scene and roughly draw in highlights where your lights are hitting. Then you might want to go through and draw out shadows on the opposite sides of things. Like maybe this edge right here will catch just a little bit of light. And so will the wall just behind it. And this edge of the door frame will definitely get more light. Be careful how strong you go, and I probably would have benefited from working on a separate layer so that when I decide to erase parts that went too hard, I'm not accidentally erasing any of that radiant shadow that I made at the beginning. So that's a quick way of making lights. Now, a secondary method that I want to show you of making lights is using things like lens flares and blending layers. So I found this lens flare, and when you're trying to find lens flares, what you want to look for is something that has a really dark background and high quality. The reason is is because when I'm on that layer, I can change the blending mode. And right now the blending mode is at normal. But if I change it down to one of the lightened ones, you can see what happens is everywhere that's dark gets hidden. And it blends only the lightest stuff in with the scene. So now with my lens flare, I can move it around. And I think I want to transform this and flip it horizontally, place it up here in my glow area. And this is pretty dramatic, and it got cut off at the end right there. So I think I'm going to go use my smudge tool, and I'm going to try to smudge that out just a little bit. And that's not exactly the kind of one that I want. Let's see. We use a couple. There we go. That's the kind of brush. I'll lower that down, make that just a little bit bigger. Smudge that. Let's make a big light eraser. And we'll dull that down so that it feels like it fits in just a little bit better. So there you go. 2 different methods of adding lights into your scene. Remember, once you start adding lights, you need to consider where the shadows are going to be. So be careful about what things you change, because it'll start to change the way your scene is perceived.